Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves. How's it going, all you minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And join me today for my overview of these latest graphic novels from Dark Horse Comics. So let's go ahead and get started. And welcome back, everybody. Now, before going any further, I do want to thank the folks at Dark Horse for sending us copies of these books. All of these books have recently come out, so all of them are available through the direct market and book market. And I wanted to do this and break it up into different segments, because there'll be another one here in a couple of weeks, or probably a week and a half or so, of other Dark Horse books that they've released recently. But I wanted to keep those separate because I wanted to suggest some things like last-minute holiday gifts, or even if you're just curious about any of these books. So we have some hardcovers, and we have some trade paperbacks, and as always, timestamps in the description of the video. But before I go any further, don't forget to smash that like button, please. That goes a long way for us here on the channel. Small thing you can do, but it means the world to us. Alright, let's go ahead and start. Let's go ahead and start with some of these classics, these EC archives. So the very first book this time around, we're talking about the Two-Fisted Tales, the EC Archives Volume 1. And it is a soft cover, this one retailing for $19.99. These have been previously released as hardcover formats, but these are now out of print. They were released both by Gemstone Publishing and then Dark Horse Comics wrapped up the series. And something you may notice or may be confused about, in case you've never read any of these type of collections, is that this collects issues number 18 through 23. And why is it Volume 1? There was a lot of renumbering, mainly due to shipping and publishing back during the time of EC Comics. So this actually is the renumbering of the Haunt of Fear, and that went on to be renumbered as well. So worry not, you're not missing anything. There's nothing really as far as the Two-Fisted Tales that came before this book. There is an introduction here, like every other EC archive by Grant Geisman, explaining what the EC archives were, what the intentions were, and how the preservation started. And then a forward here by Steve Geppi. And Steve Geppi is actually somebody I interviewed on my channel. He is the owner of Diamond Comics, talking about the history, or his history rather, with the EC line. And of course Gemstone Publishing, which he helped put out there, and the whole thing with the EC archive started over there. So what exactly is this? Like, what is the He-Man adventure? What is going on in Two-Fisted Tales? Well, eventually it became the War and Fighting Men. But this is, yes, it's your stereotypical war comics. But is it stereotypical? What does that mean? Well, keep in mind, when these books were originally published from 1950 to 1951, you know, there were war comics around. Superhero comics were, you know, were out there. But then there were war comics, there were Western comics. And what this, especially stories like this right here, War Story, this is like taking the other angle of the war and focusing on the people instead of the glorification of war. It's really interesting, like this whole history behind every single one of these volumes of EC archives. There's this rich history behind them. You know, while this may look to some people as like, oh, it's just your stereotypical or your standard war comic, no, there's a lot going on here. Nothing is really plain and simple when it comes to EC Comics. Like Will Gaines, the editor and writer, really knew how to pull people into these stories and just grab you and captivate you. So you are going to see different tales through here, different wars. You're going to see pirate ships. You're going to see exploration of the Amazon. You're going to see a lot of, like, oh my gosh, there's even the Roman Empire through here. And a lot of phenomenal creators that have graced the pages of these books. From Johnny Craig to Jack Davis, Al Feldstein, John Severin, Will Elder, Dave Berg, and of course Wally Wood. There's a lot of wonderful creators that help put these stories together. And one of the things that I do always point out, just in case people are like coming back into the world of collected editions, these are modernized colors. And they're not as vibrant as, say, something like the Absolute Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. They're not like that, but they are modern colors. Like you can definitely tell that these colors were modernized to give it a more modern look to the title when these were originally coming out, or at least being collected by Gemstone Publishing. And Dark Horse has continued that tradition by recoloring these books. So this book retails for $19.99, and it has 216 pages. And it is a soft cover. So, Eerie Archives Volume 1. So they are kicking off not just Creepy Magazine, but also Eerie Magazine, with Cousin Eerie as your host. That tells you a little bit about the stories you're about to read. Here's your introduction here by Forrest Ackerman, who actually helped with the whole Warren Publishing and all that stuff, how it got started. And there's a really good history here behind all of the Monsters of Filmland when that was coming out, when James Warren was self-publishing those, and then how he eventually led into Creepy and Eerie Magazine. Now these, unlike the EC Archives, these were done a little bit later. This was done like in the 60s. You're going to see a lot, and I mean a lot of fame. Oh my gosh, look at the freaking line work. Amazing. You're going to see a lot of names you may recognize. Some names that you may not even recognize, but you've seen their work or their influence on other properties. Not just comics, but also cartoons. This is, of course, the work of Frank Frazetta. But in here, you're going to have mainly stories by the legendary Archie Goodwin. You're going to have like a lot of artwork in here by like Steve Ditko, Alex Toth doing a lot of stuff in here, Gray Morrow, Al Williamson, and of course Frank Frazetta doing the color covers. And he stuck around for a little while. So you have your host introducing you a little bit to the story that you're about to read. And each one of these, just like the EC Archives, I believe this one here is Alex Toth, if I'm not mistaken. It just looks like his line more. Yep, Alex Toth, and the script by Archie Goodwin. What I was going to say, Joe Orlando does a lot of stuff in here, is that each one of these magazines that's collected in here is an anthology of different stories. Like, all these stories right here, you're going to be getting in one magazine. So, this is issue number 3. So, it may not seem like a lot of stories collected in here, but there are. There are a lot of creepy and weird stories collected in here. I believe this one here is by Steve Ditko, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Ditko right there. There's a lot of Italian artists. Now, this, unlike the Two-Fisted Tales, this one is a lot more horror-centric. It's a lot more creature-centric. A lot of Twisted Tales come from here, not Two-Fisted Tales. A lot of the fear of the unknown and just creepy and eerie imagery. I hate that I'm using those words, so that is the best way to describe these stories. Yeah, some of them are very stereotypical, run-of-the-mill, people getting their comeuppance, but some of them have some really good twists and turns in here. And like I said, you're going to see some early artwork by some people whose work you went on to follow in the big two, whether it's Marvel or DC. But just all of it in black and white, with the exception of the painted covers by Frazetta. And the other thing in here, that you may see some nudity in this one and a little more violence, because it is in black and white. So not like the House of Mystery or House of Secrets books. 256 pages, retailing for $24.99. So we've talked about war, we've talked about horror. And let's go back to EC with the EC Archives Weird Fantasy Volume 2. This is the sci-fi series of EC Comics. This collects issues 7 through 12, and this one has 712 pages. So in here you're going to see time travel stories. This one here has an introduction by Gene Simmons, that's right, of Kiss fame. Talking about how coming over fresh off the boat, as he calls it, from Israel, and just getting hooked on all of these fanzines that eventually led him to this path of finding EC Comics. Because EC was gone when he came over to America, and and it's really interesting to see him tell this story about how he went about getting comics, like putting ads in local newspapers, looking for single issues. You've got them, I buy them by the pound. And I think that's really awesome. And that's how he acquired so many, not just EC comics, but also Golden Age issues. So you're going to see space travel, time travel here, whether it's to the past or to the future. You're going to see different types of creatures, aliens, dinosaurs, what some of these creators thought the world would end up looking like later on. You do have Joe Orlando stuff in here. You have Jack Kamen, Wally Wood, William Gaines, of course, Al Feldstein, just to name a few of the creators whose work was published through these comics right here. And these originally came out, like I said, from 1951 to 1952, and these were bi-monthly comics. So these anthologies, these magazine size. And I love the fact that these are printed. That is so much dialogue, my gosh. I love it, man. People were getting paid by the word, it seemed like, back then. What I was going to say is that a lot of these stories collected in here are there to teach you a lesson. It's really interesting to see just how far ahead they were. There's a story in here in particular. I think it's in the final volume, if I'm not mistaken. It's called A Man's World. Let's see if I'm right. A Man's Job. Sorry about that. So this one is about the gender roles and how they've switched around in this particular universe. So I thought that was really interesting. A lot of the stories here, man. We are talking about EC comics, and there were a lot of stories in here that were way ahead of their time. So another one that is recolored, just with the modernization of these new modern colors that they've added. And I know some people don't like that, but honestly, this is the only way you're gonna get it in a collected edition, because even the archives, or not the archives, I'm sorry, the collections that came out a few years ago from Gemstone Publishing, those that come in a box set, those are all reprints in black and white. So unless you have the single issues, I think the annuals are also in color, if I'm not mistaken. And down here, they always tell you what you're looking at, just a reminder of what book you're looking at. But that is the EC Archives Weird Fantasy Volume 2. Next up is Grendel, Devil by the Deed, Master's Edition by Matt Wagner. Now, this book is also released in a limited edition slipcase, but this is the one that is available everywhere. And the actual slipcase, if you're wondering how big it is actually 7 inches wide by 11 inches tall. So what this one is really interesting, because Matt Wagner decided to go back and redraw and add, it's almost like a director's cut of his very first Grendel story. Because I've done an overview, actually, as a matter of fact, of this book right here, the Grendel Omnibus. So this is where the story first appears, one that you may have seen, that I've shown off before whenever doing overviews of these books. This is a retelling of that book, but we're going from these 37 pages of introducing you to the character of Grendel to 120. So that's right, there is a lot of pages that were added to this particular story. But not only that, it's also redrawn. Now, just really quickly, what is the story of Grendel, Devil by the Deed? This is the first story that features the character of not just Grendel, but also shows you his adversary and other supporting cast members. So really quickly, the story of Grendel is the story of Eddie, this young gifted boy that ends up leaving his world behind when his love, or the love of his life, Jocasta, dies. So what he ends up doing is takes up 2 identities. He ends up becoming Hunter Rose, who's a novelist and a socialite. So yes, just like Bruce Wayne, a socialite. But also decides to take on crime by wearing a costume and going by the name of Grendel. And that's what he does. He fights these crime bosses and just fights a bunch of gangs and ends up becoming enemies with, well, different creatures. For example, Argent. Now, something later on goes south and the story continues, but this is a retelling of that with some added material, which is just unheard of. That's really cool that he loves this story so much. And we've been hearing about this for years, right? Like, whenever Matt Wagner was working on a project, people kept asking, are you ever going to go back and redo Devil by the Deed? And sure enough, he finally did it. 2023. So there's a lot of reimagining here. And even though it fits perfectly, like I just read it, and it adds a lot of different elements to it. And honestly, kind of foreshadows some things differently. So to kind of give you an idea of what the artwork looks like compared to, well, even I think this one is actually touched up to this right here. Well, he's added those pages to me. Like, seriously, this goes back so quick. So it works a little bit at a slower pace. So for example, this one page is actually the very first narrative box right there. And then you slowly get to meet the character of Eddie right there and what ended up happening to him. And I can't show you the next page because, well, you know, you've got sexy times. But all of this was just in those caption boxes. Like, woo! So I'm glad that he decided to do this. I was hoping the book was a little bit bigger. So this is the introduction of Argent right here. And this is the way it looks here. But over here, you get a more detailed introduction, including Argent's own supporting cast that plays a bigger role, especially later on in the next few Grendel stories. So it goes into details, and, you know, this is all told like a big journal entry. Here, let me move this over here, and that's the way the original one was told, through journal entries. And there's just some amazing imagery here, and it is done in that black, white, and red with a couple of other tones in here. So Devil by the Deed, it does have mature themes, so keep that in mind. And if you've never read, that's the other thing I was going to say, if you've never read Grendel, strongly suggest reading it like this, because I think it adds so much. It doesn't take away, it actually adds more to the mythos of Grendel that will make you want to go and pick these up. And hopefully one day we'll get like oversized format of these books, because my goodness, that text sometimes is a little, especially in the Hunter Rose story, those are a little hard to read the older you get. This is a hardcover with art on board. Let's look at the spine here, and then the back of the book, retailing for $29.99, and the book has now 137 pages. There is a little bit in the back. Let's look at the back matter, telling you what the Master Edition is, and then showing you some original pages. This is when it was by Comico, if I'm not mistaken, through the back-ish, or the back pages of Mage, I think. And then how it transitioned over to this. So I think that's really cool that an artist did this. I would love to see other creator-owned people go back and maybe just retell their favorite stories, not from the beginning, because I know some people don't like to go back to the beginning. But I would love to see a lot of these creators go back and like modernize some of this older stuff. Just me, and beautiful end sheets. It is a standard size hardcover, meaning the dimensions are that of a trade paperback. So that is something to keep in mind. It does have sewn binding, so the book just lays over really nicely. So, and that is Devil by the Deed, Master's Edition. The Fifth Beatle, the Brian Epstein story. This is the 10th anniversary edition. This was previously published in trade paperback format. It's also been available in a hardcover format. But this latest edition has some extra goodies in here. This is a soft cover, and it retails for $24.99. Now, I made this one of the best standalone stories. I think it was in 2021, 2022. Like, best standalone graphic novel. One of the top 10 best standalone graphic novels of all time. That's why this one gets my seal of approval. If you've never read it and you've trusted me on past hidden gems or past recommendations, because usually when I do overviews, I tend to stay neutral and just talk about the stories and the artwork. But for this one, whenever I talk about my seal of approval, I explain why. The story in here is beautiful. You don't need to look at any of the artwork. Go and get it. Seriously, you're not going to be disappointed. This is a really powerful story. And Vivek Tiwari, I actually interviewed him a couple of weeks back. He was so excited. We got to talk about the the behind the scenes of how all this came about and how long he'd been working on it. But if you've ever trusted me, go and get it. Seriously, you're gonna love it. I hope. Everybody else that still is like, oh, well, let's see what this is about. So the Fifth Beatle. Let's open it up. This is by Vivek Tiwari. You have artwork in here by Andrew C. Robinson. Kyle Baker does some of the art, and then you have Steve Dutro doing the coloring. Your introduction here by Kelly Curtis. This is the manager of Pearl Jam, talking about this book in 2023. You also have the original 2013 introduction by Billy Kramer. And then I believe there is Kevin Smith, giving you blurbs, and then the Vivek Tiwari. And there's something really cool in the back. So this is the dedications page for Nandini and Malka, and then Jim and Leah. So what is this? What is this about? Why do I think this is such a good book? I not only think it's a good book, I think this is one of those graphic novels masterpieces. This is a beautiful story. It brings to life the story of Brian Epstein, who, to the Beatles, Paul McCartney, who is quoted as calling him the fifth Beatle, he was the fifth Beatle. Now, this version has 184 pages, and like I said, retails for $24.99. It's printed in this big, beautiful, thick, glossy paper. So what Vivek does is he takes this story, and instead of making it a straightforward narrative, he decides to go the other route. He decides to make it more expressionistic, to make it a little more surreal, especially in the way that Brian deals with a lot of things going on. So Brian is the manager of the Beatles. And this is all taking place, of course, back in the 60s. And he also happens to be a gay man. And back then, things were different. Laws were different. And when you find out, when I told Vivek when I interviewed him that I love stories like this because I know, you could tell probably sometimes he took liberties with some of the stories and the storytelling. But it still made me go back and research the life of Brian and the laws that were existing at that time. But you get to find out everything through here, how it all kind of came together, how the Beatles were touring, what he was doing, what exactly became Brian's downfall. And I don't want to spoil this for anybody because it's such a wonderful, beautiful story and just so well drawn. And let me just show you one of the things that they do through here. So there's the Chaos in the Philippines story right here that is done in this cartoon, the Beatles cartoon art style. Not so much so the Yellow Submarine, although that does get a little bit of pages in here, but it's mainly done in that particular style. You're going to see famous people from that particular era of music that appear through here, so it's not just the Beatles, and it's all, telling the story of Brian and how important he was and what ended up happening to him. It's a beautiful story, not to be missed. Really hope I'm doing it justice. If anyone was the fifth Beatle, it was Brian. Paul McCartney, 1999, and this is the original cover to the hardcover release. This Feeling That Remains. This is from the 2013 version. This is really cool. This is the liner notes for the soundtrack. Like what Vivek and I actually talked about this. So this was not collected in the original hardcover edition. You didn't get like the whole playlist. You do get some of the sketches in the original version, but you get more in this particular version, such as that soundtrack. So that's really cool. But here is the script and the original piece right there. Sketches and concept art. Yeah, this was so good. Even though it's one of those things that's actually taking place because this was a real person. These are real people. It just feels different. And it felt like something new. And that's why I fell in love with it so many years ago. And you get to find out, the private struggles of Brian and in his life. And what it was like to live back then and to be in the public eye. Some more pieces of art right there. Oh, the color cover. That's the edition that you see at the front. Brian Epstein's introduction to the Hall of Fame. There's Vivek Tiwari. He actually has Brian Epstein's business card. Yeah, so there's all these, there it is, yeah. There's all these new things that are added to this edition. So in case you've never read it, don't miss out on it. This is a beautiful graphic novel. Cyberpunk 2077 Library Edition Volume 1. My brother completely wants this book. He's a big fan of the Cyberpunk video games. And I have never played it. So, you're just going to get my overview of the comic because I don't have any ties to the video games. But I will say, holy crap, this makes me want to go and explore this world because it was so addicting to read. This collects the Trauma Team Cyberpunk 2077 miniseries, all 4 issues. It also has You Have My Word, 1 through 4, and then Cyberpunk 2077 Blackout. And each one of them is done by a different creative team. You have Cullen Bunn doing Trauma Team with Miguel Valderrama, and You Have My Word is done by Bartosz Stizbor. Boy, I don't think I even tried. Bartosz Stibor. Maybe? Hopefully. Jesus Hervas, and then Julia Brusco. And then you also have Bartosz coming back for the Blackout story, and then Robert Ricci doing the art for Blackout. So in this library edition, you have those 3 miniseries, and each one is a little bit different. This one retails for $49.99, and it has 328 pages. So the Trauma Team is all about this young lady in the Trauma Team named Nadia. So Nadia is having flashbacks. Her original team got wiped out, mainly by one particular person. And she wants to go back. Like, her entire team got killed. And it's a really interesting story because she says that the whole reason she wanted to join the Trauma Team was because she wanted to help people. She didn't want to hurt anybody. But her entire team, through a series of flashbacks, because she's going through therapy, gets wiped out as you find out. And then she wants to be cleared for active duty. It turns out that this one guy wiped out her entire team, left her alive, including somebody that she had close ties to. So she's finally cleared for active duty, and they go in with her, or she goes in with her new team, and they get a call. And it turns out that there's gang activity in this tower that has like 100 floors. So it's 100 stories. This one reminds me a little bit of The Raid or Judge Dredd, or the Dredd movie, sorry. But as it turns out, they were hired to protect a unique client. And the client turns out to be the guy that wiped out her team. Now her and her new team have to protect this guy. Even though she said she was ready to go back out to the field, and they have to survive all these gangs that are coming after them. This was such an awesome story. I didn't expect it to go the ways that it went. So that's Trauma Team, and let's just keep going to the next story, and this is You Have My Word. This is what I thought was going to be about this young lady right here, Oriona. Turns out to be a little bit different. So she's making some deals with the underworld, and then we meet her mom, who's a waitress, sweet old lady with a robotic arm. A lot of these people do. I'm sure if you play the game, you're like, everybody does. Dude, what are you talking about? It's Cyberpunk 2077, that's what it's about. I don't know. I've never played the game. I've seen the cover. So, looks awesome. But anyway, she's doing some deals with the underground, and her mom is raising Oriona's daughter. This is Weira, along with her husband, who also has prosthetic legs right there. Or cybernetic legs. Now, what ends up happening after she meets her mom's like, you need to come home, raise your daughter. I'm her grandmother. It's different when your grandmother raises you. And Oriona's like, yeah, I'll come back, I promise. And then what ends up happening is Oriona ends up getting killed. So Teresa, that's the mom's name, has a secret of her own. So this is a revenge story. So Oriona's roommate comes in, her friend comes in, and she tells her mother that she's been killed. So now it becomes a revenge story. And Teresa is not her name. They call her something else in the underworld. And it just becomes this big, violent revenge story. Holy crap, this one was also awesome. And in ways that I didn't expect it to go. And I think that's why I really enjoyed these particular stories. In the final one, this is Blackout. So you do have the covers right here. This is about Arturo. So let's go back. This guy right here, who is a brain dance repairman. So he repairs the little headsets that people wear to escape. Now him and Albeda and a group of friends are gonna go and rob a bank. This one is really different than the other ones. And I feel like this is the most joyous one compared to the other two stories. Like, this one does have a lot of sad elements, and it is violent. By the way, this is mature themes. There's violence and sexual content in here, language, just in case. But even though it does have that kind of stuff, and it's a little bit sad, it still feels like the most joyous one out of the 3 stories that's collected in here. Now, let's look in the back. So all the way in the back, you have variant covers, and the standard edition covers are in between the issues. But these are the variants right here for the different series. And then you have concept art, character sketches back here, original pieces of art, and it's for every series. So, like, that's the first series, this is the second one, and then the third one, you get original artwork in here too, original pages. And this is a big, beautiful edition. I mean, Dark Horse puts a lot of love and care to these particular library editions. 328 pages, and it retails for $44 or $49.99. And as far as the binding of this one, it is sewn binding. It does have a flat spine, and it is printed in this really thick, glossy paper stock. Last but certainly not least is Black Hammer. This is the Library Edition Book 3. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say this just in case. If you've not read Black Hammer Volume 1 and 2, or even World of Black Hammer, maybe not all of them. 1 and 2 are the most important ones. Pass. Go to the outro. Hit that like button on your way out. I don't want to spoil this for anybody, because even talking about the pitch of this would spoil that. So just in case, spoilers. Let's look at our flaps right here. So this does have a dust jacket. Underneath the dust jacket is the exact same art and spine and everything that you see on the dust jacket, including the ISBN down there, retailing for $49.99. You just don't have the flaps right there. So this all takes place in the aftermath of the big 2 stories, where the original team gets destroyed, and you end up finding out that the anti-god was there, and what ends up happening to the original team of superheroes, right? Because this is a big love letter to superheroes, whether from the Golden Age or Silver Age, or even Bronze and Modern Age, for Jeff Lemire, and I love this story. Now, fast forward 20 years, so actually 30 years from when they first got lost. So remember when the anti-god showed up in 1986, took those people away. 10 years later, Lucy ends up finding them, Lucy Weber. Now, this is after she finds them, and you can find out. I'm not going to go into detail as to what happens in the original story. 20 years later is where this starts. And it is the story of Lucy and her family. And she's having domestic issues. Like, her life is falling apart. She's no longer a superhero. She keeps having these flashbacks about being a superhero and what it meant to her. And there's a reason why she gave up being a superhero. And when you find out, you're like, oh, well, that actually makes sense. So we do go back to, like, 1996, when she was still the Black Hammer, because she became the Black Hammer after her dad. And she was fighting crime. And then what ended up happening to her that made her stop fighting crime, made her give up the hammer. So, you know, her work isn't the best, her home life isn't the best. She finds out something horrible about her husband. Her kids are a little bit messed up. As a matter of fact, her kids are interacting with this portal that's opening up. This is Amanda, her friend that was in the original series. This one here, by the way, is drawn by Caitlin Yarsky. As a matter of fact, let's give credit where credit is due, because big take on that Walter Simonson image. So Reborn 1 through 4. So this collects all of Reborn issues 1 through 12. And it has 328 pages. So this Caitlin Yarsky does Reborn 1 through 4 and 9 through 12. And then you have Malachi Ward and Matthew Sheehan doing Reborn 5 through 8. Now, there are like 2-page backup stories of, yes, the case of the Electric Boy, parts 1 through 4. Those are all drawn and lettered by Rich Tommaso. So those, I can't even show you what that's about, because I think that would be a spoiler, so I'm just going to play it safe. So as you read through here, you get to find out exactly the moment that Lucy decided to put away the hammer and stop being the Black Hammer and why she did. However, she has secrets of her own, too. And you get to find out how she met her husband, because, you know, we don't know who this guy was. And her own two kids have their own secrets. There's a character named Electric Rod that plays an important part in her backup story. Skull Digger shows up. There are some characters that do show up. One of the biggest ones playing a big part in this story is the character of Colonel Weird. And he plays a huge part in this story. And there he is right there. Now, he's not the only character that shows up through here. Now, it does take a weird turn. Even though you still focus on her, you go back and forth between focusing on the character of Lucy and then perhaps some other members of the team that could have survived or are out there somewhere. And where exactly are they? There is a heartbreaking moment in here that made me just drop my jaw when it happened. I was like, what? Of course Jeff Lemire did that. But I think that's all I will say about it. That is the main pitch. There's definitely weird things going on. Colonel Weird, of course. Time travel elements, other dimensions. You have the anti-god, and you have Lucy Weber. Will she pick up the hammer and become the Black Hammer once more to fight off against evil? Well, one way for you to find out. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Let's look at the back for some extras. So this is the Black Hammer Reborn web exclusive variant, and then you have original page art right there, some concept artwork for the way she would look in her 20s, and then of course in her 40s, the Trident. This is the team of specialists that go after supervillains. Cover concept art and frame layouts right here, and then the layouts right here for the framing and the colors and original art. This is so awesome. I can't wait for people to read it and let me know what they think. Because if you've enjoyed the Black Hammer stories so far, you're going to love this one. Especially if you've been waiting for the library editions. Because I know these were released in standard size trade paperbacks and hardcovers. But this is the first time it's been released in a library edition. Alright, let's check out the binding. I'm a monster. I left the dust jacket on, damn it. 328 pages. It is sewn binding, and look, a nice ribbon, just like the rest of them. And that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing any of these books, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content and page count of each of these books. Let me know in the comments down below if you are picking these up, if you're hoping one day the EC archives are reprinted in hardcover format, or same for the Eerie archives. If you have been picking up the Cyberpunk comics, or you're going to upgrade to the library editions, and what you think about the newly redrawn Devil by the Deed. And yes, Black Hammer. Ooh, that ending, my goodness. But that's it, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.